You know, growing up, if I wasn't playing video games, I was just glued to cartoons, anime, or whatever movie my parents took me to see in the theaters. And back in the late 2000s, it seemed like to me, everything that I watched had some form of a video game adaptation. Transformers, Naruto, Avatar, Meet the Robinsons, and even Ratatouille. Yes, the movie about the rat cooking. As fun as these games were growing up, one thing that I remember very fondly is how varied the quality could be when it comes to licensed video games back then. Because there were times where there was some that were fairly solid, and there were some that were really, really bad. Oh God.
Fuck you.
I can remember that.
And fuck you too, pretty boy.
What are you looking at?
I'm looking for Tyler Durden.
And a lot of these type of games were in my little childhood slot rotation. But then there was one licensed game that I didn't expect to enjoy as much as I did. You see, when I was 9 years old, I watched Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, and looking back, this probably wasn't the most age-appropriate movie for a child to watch. But I instantly fell in love with this movie. It was a mix between the video game references, the humor, the music, and the way that every scene was just directed almost as if it was in a comic book. It just stuck with me. And one day I was on Xbox Live and I saw an ad for a Scott Pilgrim video game. And based on everything I knew about licensed video games, my expectations were kind of whatever. But little did I know that this game was supposed to be a disaster. So for those who are unfamiliar with Scott Pilgrim, you see this series started out as a indie graphic novel about a guy who has to fight his girlfriend's 7 evil exes in order to keep dating her. Now, this concept does sound goofy as hell, but it clicked with a lot of people and it ended up building a nice cult following. Now, right in the middle of the movie being made, Ubisoft stepped in and said, hey, you know, what if we made a tie-in game to further promote the series? Which, in hindsight, sounds like a pretty good idea, right? You can not only promote the movie that is coming out fairly soon, but you can also promote the graphic novel. And that sounds great, but you have to make the game within 5 months. And this was Ubisoft during their prime. Ubisoft was making Assassin's Creed Brotherhood, it was making Prince of Persia and the Forgotten Sins, and it was working on Splinter Cell Conviction. These were 3 of their biggest games during that time. And I'm thinking to myself, why would you even take the project in if you can only make it in 5 months? It also didn't help that this game was only 20% finished around this time. You got 1 level finish out of the 7 that's in the game. You also got 1 character finish out of the 5 that were in the game. Now, Ubisoft did try to find other studios to help finish the game, but nobody wanted to touch it. And honestly, I don't blame them. This game could have easily been a disaster. But luckily, Ubisoft had a studio in China that stepped up to help work on the rest of the game. They took a nearly impossible task to finish this game under such a strict deadline. Oh, I can only imagine the stress. You got limited time, limited resources, and you practically have to build a game that's hardly finished. But somehow the team pushed through and released a game that wasn't just finished. It was good. Like, pretty damn good. For Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, the game, there are 4 factors that play a big role in this game's success, starting with the most noticeable aspect that you will see the moment you start up the game, and that's the art direction. The game leans towards this pixel art retro beat 'em up style that really fits Scott Pilgrim perfectly. A huge part of it comes from Paul Robertson, who serves as the lead artist and animator for the game. He has a very chaotic, expressive art style, and pairing that with Brian Lee O'Malley, yes, the original author, was also involved with the creative process with the game. This all led to this game having its own identity visually while still capturing the charm and aesthetic that made people love Scott Pilgrim to begin with. And I, for one, am a huge fan of sprite work, so seeing how much personality they squeeze into these animations is amazing. And when you play this game, you notice that every character is very expressive. They have their own mannerisms, they have their own unique attacks, taunts, and even special moves that make them stand out, and even with the NPCs having their own little quirks here and there. And then you have the environments that go just as hard. A lot of the locations that you see in game are from the comics and the movies, like the snowy Toronto streets, the movie set, the forest, and the team even added a few original areas that still fit the world perfectly. And every level has its own atmosphere and tiny details that just make the world feel like you're in Scott Pilgrim. And I love that. And then there's the music. The music in this game is so good. It's basically the soul of the game. Anamanaguchi, yes, try saying that 3 times fast, absolutely went off when they were making the soundtrack for this game. The soundtrack has this very upbeat, nostalgic mix of chiptune and rock, and the mix of just using the different guitars, drums, synths, and everything is just layered together in it. Oh, it sounds so good. From tracks like Another Winter, Suburban Tram, Cheap Shop, Rock Club, Leave the Past Behind. These tracks are my absolute favorite, and you may even hear some of these songs in the video itself as background music. It really captures the vibe of the game. Then there's the gameplay, which I will say does lean towards the classic side-scrolling beat 'em up. And at its core, the aspects that make a beat 'em up are still there. You can walk left and right, you can sidestep, you can use fast and strong attacks, you can pick up and grab enemies and items from the ground, and you can pretty much turn the crowd of enemies into chump change, literally. But there's some unique mechanics and quirks to Scott Pilgrim. You do have super attacks that can be used as a get off me tool that costs some resources, and then you have knives as your assist function in the game, which can change depending on what character you use. And you have this cool mechanic called the end zone, where if you knock 5 enemies down without getting hit, you get a nice passive that makes you a part of the speed force. Literally, I mean, look how fast this character is going. I mean, you're not catching up with this. Now, each character's moveset does share some similarities with one another, but they all have their own strengths and small quirks that make them stand out, like their own stats, their ranges, hitboxes, specials, and even assists. And there's some tech moves that give them their identity. Now, as you're playing the game, you are going to notice that there is a level up system, and there's some RPG factors that are in the mix. You are going to slowly gain levels, gain XP, and as you're going through the combat of the game, you're going to eventually evolve into a powerhouse, since there are stats that can determine your agility, your strength, your willpower, and how much damage you can take. And as you're earning money, you can put those funds into health resources, or you can buy items to increase your character stats. Trust me, you're going to need to upgrade those stats, because there are enemies in this game that are going to hit you like a truck, and I promise you, depending on what difficulty you play on, this game is going to be either fairly easy or be difficult. There are definitely certain sections in this game and even bosses that will give you a challenge. And it wouldn't be a beat 'em up without co-op, right? Yeah, you can either play by yourself or you can play locally with friends. And in a later update, they eventually added online co-op. However, it has its fair share of issues, and the desyncs in between sessions were mad frequent. But when you play this game locally or through Parsec, this game is super fun. There's a little jank here and there, but it's a pretty fun ride. And last but not least, the most important factor that led to this game's success is the faithfulness to the source material. This game pulls a lot from the graphic novels and movies while also adding its own flavor, just blending in a mix of everything, and it feels like this game is its own extension of the Scott Pilgrim universe. Humor is spot on. The enemies and the bosses of the game have this very over-the-top but goofy design, and it matches the tone of Scott Pilgrim. And even with the little details like the background gags, the character mannerisms, and even the way the game handles transitions in between stages, feels straight off a comic book. Hell, even the story structure mirrors the book more than the movie. You're literally fighting through the League of Evil X's one by one per stage, and the game doesn't really waste time to really retell you the plot of the movies and the graphic novels, and you can just jump straight in and play through the game with no worries. And the references, oh my gosh, there are so many references in this game. They're everywhere. And it's not just the obvious ones like the bosses, the locations, the subtle nods. The fan service is just well done, and it feels like a love letter to fans who love the series. So after the game's launch, we actually did receive a handful of DLC updates. Knives and Walls became playable characters, we got 2 extra game modes, and we eventually ended up getting online play, since that wasn't in the base game. But in 2014, things took a turn for the worse. You see, Scott Pilgrim ended up getting delisted from digital stores after Ubisoft's license agreement with Universal Pictures ended up expiring. This was terrible. I mean, the game never had a physical release, so if you didn't already own Scott Pilgrim on your account or on your console, there was no legitimate way to buy the game anymore. At that point, your options were to either game share with a friend, hunt down through the eBay listing for a console that has the game, or just buy a used account that had the game. At that point, the game slipped into becoming lost media. And from that moment, it really made me realize how important video game preservation really is, especially when it comes to licensed and digital only games. And for a good while, there wasn't much news surrounding the game ever really coming back until the 10-year anniversary for both the movie and the game was announced, and Ubisoft ended up dropping a trailer that Scott Pilgrim was gonna come back to modern platforms as a complete edition with all of its DLC. And it really uplifted a lot of fans, including many people who never really got the chance to play the game during its initial release, and it was fantastic. At the end of the day, Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, the game, was one of those licensed titles that really had a lot of odds stacked against them. I mean, it was rushed, it was underfunded, it was nearly abandoned and delisted, and somehow it still manages to be a cult classic after all these years. It's a stylish, charming, and fun game that is a reminder of what a team actually can do and when they care about the source material that they're adapting. And for me, this game wasn't just a beat 'em up, it was a gateway of getting into the franchise, into the genre, and really into understanding how passion can just really shine when it comes to a game that has a really tight development cycle. It's a game that should have failed, but it ended up being something special.